Matthew here with the. Hello, everyone. Sorry, that was my tractor beam intro. There we go. Let me try that again. Hello, everyone, and happy Family Day up here. Happy President's Day down there. All the best to Jimmy Carter. I got tractor beam on the brain. That's why I did this. Welcome to the Ccanon podcast, your home on the Star Wars Underworld podcast network for in-depth discussion on the lore, the High Republic, and the whole darn canon of the galaxy far, far away. My name is Matthew, and I'm joined across the continent by your friend of mine, Mr. Joel Davis. Joel, how are you doing this week?
Doing good.
Right on. Do you guys? Or I'll set this up. But I mean, did you get any kind of President's Day thing going on?
No, I mean we don't have school today, so that's nice.
There we go. That's something. Yeah. And so to set this up, you're the sequelist. I'm the prequelist. Let's come together and have a good old time connecting our two favorite trilogies. And to help us out, you see him in the on YouTube on the screen. See him there. He's a video editor at Culture Slate, #FandomFam, and a veritable friend of the pod. It is Omar the Negotiator. How's it going, Omar?
Hey there, everybody. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast. And I'm just excited to talk about the sequels and how they relate to the prequels. It's one of my favorite topics. So
there we go. Right on. Did you get anything? Do anything for President's Day?
To be quite honest with you, no, not really. Today was a normal, average day. I did laundry, so nice. Hey, great.
Are there President's Day traditions? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. It's another day for
not
me.
Really.
Not really. Yeah. It's the thing. Yeah, we have Family Day to coincide with it, I guess. Usually just a day off. I got a day off from work. That was nice. That's fun. Okay, there are ways to contact us to get the plugs. Plugs off the top out of the way. Follow us Twitter, Instagram at @IonCanonPod, also on Twitch, and of course on the Fandom Fam, Star Wars Underworld, Facebook and Twitter as well. You can follow me. The reason I did hello everyone, Matthew here. The reason I start with that is how I start my Tractor Beam episodes, as I mentioned. My weekly comic book reviews. Comics come out Wednesday. I do my darndest to record about a 10-15 minute episode, audio only, on the comics, just giving my thoughts. This week I had Bounty Hunters number 31 and the ongoing Star Wars number 31. Yeah, not too bad. Coming up to the end of all of those runs. Bounty Hunters, funny enough, here's a spoiler. Inferno Squad shows up at the end of that, and I forgot to mention Inferno Squad in the thing because it was one little panel at the end. It isn't really that significant. It will be more significant next issue, I'm sure. Other ways to get in touch with us: YouTube memberships and super chats. You're on the Star Wars Underworld channel, as well as Discord events or Discord channel, the Star Wars Underworld Discord server, I should say, and where we chat, we hang out, we talk, we show my Legos, we show pets, we talk about Star Trek, among other things. Joel, you have any plugs, any events to plug in the Discord?
Yes, I do. This Friday, we will be having our game night at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern, where we will be once again playing Fortnite. Yes, we have voted, and Fortnite was the winner by one vote. So if you want to come and play with us, feel free. And if you don't, well, feel free to join us anyway in chat. We are always happy to have you.
Yeah, I've I think Ben or somebody will just show his screen on the in the Discord chat, and you can just hang out there. That's usually what I'll do if I end up showing up to that. Yeah, so if you want to get in the server, the link down below is minty fresh, and so click away and say hi. We're just normal guys chatting away. Yeah. We chat a lot there, so all good. Yeah, okay, so let's move right along then. Very quickly, our week in Star Wars. Joel, you have maybe one thing to mention, and Omar, if you have one thing to mention, go for it.
Yes, I have been watching with a friend all the Star Wars saga films in order, 1 through 9. We have just finished Phantom Menace, and hopefully we're going to start Attack of the Clones this week, so I'm excited.
Right on, that's right on. Any kind of insights from Phantom Menace?
I really love Phantom Menace, and I always go back and forth on which one is my favorite of the prequels. Phantom Menace or Revenge of the Sith. It's like this close, man. It's like some days I like Phantom Menace a little more, but I like Revenge of the Sith a little more.
Yeah,
kind of depends.
Two fantastic films. Attack of the Clones also a fantastic film. I truly deeply love it. Omar, what have you been up to? We're gonna get to Bad Batch in a few minutes, but what have you been up to in the galaxy far, far away?
Yeah, I mean, outside of Bad Batch, which I've been keeping up with every single week. The only thing I've really been doing is I've been with all the talk of Star Wars Visions, Volume 2 or Season 2 coming out.
Right.
I decided to revisit a few of the episodes, and I think is it the Jedi Bride? I believe is no, not the Village Bride. Sorry, yeah, the Village Bride. I think I was combining two names there. Yeah, it was the Village Bride that the episode that I most recently rewatched, and it's a great episode. It really is. I love Star Wars animation. Joel, I've talked to you before about how much I love Star Wars animation. And so it's always a treat to get to revisit these shorts. And I'm super excited for Volume 2. I'm super excited to see new types of animation. I'm so curious to see what the Wallace and Gromit studio and what exactly they're going to do that's Star Wars related. Because that's a match made in heaven? I don't know.
Somewhere.
Yeah, somewhere. It's made somewhere.
On Yago, I guess.
But it's exciting. I'm so curious to see what that's going to bring and what all of them are going to bring, and to just have more Star Wars animation. So
right on. Looks really fantastic. It's it's one of those things where I don't worry about it being canon or not, and so that also means, unfortunately, I haven't given as much attention to it, which is not that great, because it's great to imagine and push the limits. I mean, Lego does that great as well. My week, we're just blowing through these very quickly because we want to get to it. I gotta get to work in the morning. I finally finished Quest for the Hidden City, so I am caught up on all of High Republic so far. All of High Republic, Phase 1, Phase 2, and it started Thrawn Ascendancy, Lesser Evil. Finally, I know I'm a few years late to the party on that one, maybe a year or so. But Tim's on, writing, and and that's the interesting thing with the Thrawn, the Ascendancy books, especially, because they're so off the beaten path, so out there that are they even Star Wars books in the same way? So it's a nice break there, a nice gelato refresher there.
Some might say they're more like Star Trek books.
Some might say, in some ways. I mean, especially the Thrawn trilogy, the Ccanon Thrawn trilogy, is the Empire of the Federation. Speaking of Star Trek, so I got to mention something. That's my other this week is Picard season 3 came out, and the reason I'm bringing this up, I promise, it's related to Star Wars. So, The Force Awakens, I've mentioned my feelings and thoughts. We'll get into the sequel trilogy overall. The whole Chewie we're home moment didn't really land for me as much, maybe as much as say in Kenobi, the prequel moments in Kenobi. But for some folks who encountered Star Wars from the beginning of their lives, I only came to it a little later, older childhood, maybe 7 or 8. For me, my childhood was The Next Generation, and my early childhood was that. So seeing the uniform, seeing the communicator, all that, the warm fuzzy nostalgia of The Force Awakens, I finally understand. I was able to really connect with it I understood it, but I was able to connect with it in a more visceral way, seeing or understand why people connect and get that more, why people connect with The Force Awakens more than say I do, because for them A New Hope is their warm fuzzy childhood with a bit of skew. There's always, both Picard and Force Awakens, the tone, the style, just the appearance, the music, there's always something a little off, a little skew, a little pushing forward. But the combination is really what works for both of those. So yes, I was finally able to bring up Picard in Star Wars, in the Star Wars
Make
podcast.
Make it so.
I brought up Star Trek last time with the Klingons.
Hey, I mean, that's cool. I'm such a it's a foreign world to me, Star Trek. I've tried a few times, but I've never really dedicated a day to okay, I'm going to watch the Star Trek thing. So it's always interesting to hear that, and in particular in regards to Thrawn and to see just the differences in the Thrawn stories in comparison to the rest of Star Wars. That's interesting stuff. Yeah,
it is.
I'm waiting for my DS9 nostalgia.
I mean, that's coming too. All right. Speaking of back to animation, back to the galaxy far, far away. I mean, we never left. It was the point. My point I was making was, I get why people connect to Force Awakens more, and why it really did help return Star Wars to the public consciousness, because it tapped into the warm fuzzy nostalgia, but also gave folks something a little bit new. Not too much new, but a little bit new. Okay, let's move on here. Eyes on screen with Clone Force 99, Bad Batch Season 2, Episode 9, The Crossing. Omar, I'll turn to you. What did you think of this episode?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll just go ahead and preface this that I talked briefly about I talked for a while about the latest Bad Batch episode over at Star Raptor's channel, I believe, Outer Transmissions, right? The
Outer
name of the
Rim
podcast. Yeah, the Outer Rim Transmissions.
Mhm.
And I'll just kind of summarize exactly kind of how I felt here. At the end, I kind of gave this episode like a 7 out of 10. I enjoyed it. I think it was great. The highlight of the episode very clearly. I thought what was great about it was the highlight of the episode, which was the conversation between Tech and Omega. Just the conversation about how Tech, processes information differently. It was an important conversation for them to have, especially for Omega, who's, going through it with the loss of Echo, at least in her mind. So that was the highlight of the episode for me. Everything else was kind of just built around that moment and trying to get these two characters, and that's to get into that situation, to have that conversation. So because of that, the episode was fine. I thought just overall it was great to see a callback to the Lion King. Who would have expected that? But yeah, no, I enjoyed the episode greatly.
Mm-hmm. Was it the Stampede? Is that the callback? Or?
In my opinion, yes. Yeah, the Stampede. It was all, yeah.
Disney House of Mouse, Joel, what did you think of this episode?
Oh, I loved it. Tech autism representation for the win, I say. It was nice to I was worried that, they were just gonna go back to fun adventures, and after 2 episodes of like big stuff going on, and it felt like that at first, like, oh no, a Sid mission. But then everything started going wrong so quickly. They lost their ship. The Tech Echo Omega stuff with Omega test. Well, it's Echo, and the loss of Echo is very much felt. I like that this episode doesn't kind of wrap up as neatly. I like that there's like. Reminds me of like some of the season 1 stuff. I feel like, okay, the episodes are building off of each other. Like next episode, we gotta get the ship back. What's going on with Sid? He seems very, a lot more, not willing to help. Obviously, again, the emotional core of losing Echo is all there. So yeah, overall, really good episode, and kind of keep that momentum going, I say.
Yeah, kind of echo what you guys both said. Yeah, it really. It didn't drop the whole the whole ramifications of Tech being gone, of Echo being gone rather. Like it showed Omega actually having to deal with it emotionally. This kid who's been through so much, having to deal with this yet another thing. Now with the loss of her friend, her brother, and her home, processing that it isn't fully a loss. With you guys, I loved everything between Tech and Omega, and just dealing with Tech as a character, the representation bit, hearing him process emotions in his own way, that was fantastic. And Joel, like you said, it leaves it's a cliffhanger. It doesn't actually finish the story. It leaves it on to things to be resolved, maybe in the next episode. Is this Sid actually betraying them, as was established, was set up before? We don't know, or at least the confrontation within herself to say, am I going to betray these folks, be who I've always been, or am I going to be someone better? That question is going to hopefully come up, and it's been raised now in that moment with that transmission. The fact that it left it on a cliffhanger, even if the actual circumstances of the story are smaller, the cliffhanger reminds us that it gives a feeling of something bigger and more significant happening, especially for character. And this has been the debate with this episode. This is a profound character story. This whole season is a profound character story, I think, especially for Omega, because character equals story. Yes, there is the larger political ramifications, political implications. I was just talking about this with our friends Dom and Din the other day, and we were talking about how Dom was pointing out, we're both of them were pointing out how we're so used to needing something to resolve and then lead to something else, just the kind of the this endorphin rush of episodes and streaming, and how well that, the fact that this episode, this series isn't letting us do that so much, and so yeah, and almost pointing out the difference between story and plot being, he's kind of taking his film school lessons here, and saying plot is this happened, then that happened, then this happened. Story is what is the journey of this character, what are the journey of these relationships through time. And Bad Batch is hitting it. It's nailing it. I'm really happy and satisfied with this. Again, I love the large scale historical stuff. We spend copious amounts of time on this podcast talking about the large scale historical stuff and what that might mean. It's also good to remember that these shows are exploring these large scale histories, the story of the clones after Order 66, through the viewpoint, through the eyes of these actual characters, not real people, but relatable people we can connect to. So that is why the F word is banned from this channel. I won't even say it. And not that F word, I mean the F word, where
I'll say it, filler.
You have a container of stuff in.
The filler word.
It's banned. I mean, Joe, you can say it for to let people know what we're talking about, but nope, it's not. It's not
perfect. Yeah,
because Filoni didn't do that. George Lucas didn't do that. Filoni doesn't do that. Even in Rebels, it seemed like it because we don't fully know the ending. This episode is building something.
Yeah, and if I could add on to that, it kind of leads me to two questions that I want to ask you guys. And one, the first question, very much on topic, is like all these, because I'm online a lot and I see a lot of pushbacks. Occasional pushback is to the Bad Batch. I know. And of course, it always leads to, oh, this episode was very F word, Philly, and but at the end though, I do feel like there's a sense of like a lot of the anger that people have towards these kind of mission like episodes is kind of directed towards, it's always Sid, because it's and you could tell people are always angry at Sid because like she is the encapsulation of what like the type of missions that these characters are going on. And so I think it's purposeful, and especially for the fact that we're at a point where I think narratively we're asking, like, can you trust Sid? Are you supposed to be feeling a little annoyed at Sid at this point? And I think the answer is yes. I mean, I don't know anyone who didn't see that last few minutes of this episode and think, oh, that was great of Sid. I'm so glad Sid kept it real with them. No, that was a poopy thing to do of Sid. And so, like, I feel like it is gearing up to be something. As to what, I don't know, and as to it'll be a satisfying something, I don't know either. So we'll have to see.
Yeah. I mean, so good.
I was gonna say, I actually talked about this with my buddy Doc Hollicker on his channel, and one thing we both kind of pointed out is like I think some of this, I'm gonna call it aimlessness for now, because that's the only word I can still think of both the season is kind of purposeful, because it's like. The Bad Batch feel kind of aimless, but that's the point, like Echo's the one who's like, hey, we should go to Rex and we should have like the cool adventures with Rex and fight the rebellion. And as our buddy Don would always say, risk it all for something real. But they're like, nah, we want to help. Hunter is more like we got to make our living. We got to help Sid with racing and mining episodes. And we can talk about whether or not each individual episode like had strong character moments and the execution is all that and yada. But I do think that is the purpose of that season. And I'm actually more and more these days on the side of I think the show's getting at least one more season. Because they didn't announce just the last season, and they did that for the other shows. So that makes sense. Yeah. Unless Bad Batch sadly just gets the shaft even worse, stab in the back. I hope not, but I don't think so.
I highly doubt it.
Right.
But and then my hope is that when season 3 comes along, they make their decision. Okay, now we join Rex. We now become part of the clone insurgents. We risk it all for something real. And season 3 is a lot more, just a lot more there's a more of a sense of like, okay, we have our focus now. I think you're right. I think that there is a lot of, I do think a lot of it is intentional. I don't particularly enjoy the Zepho episode myself as an individual 20 minutes, but I do think that's still part of the overarching kind of trajectory. But Matthew, you go on.
Well, first of all, Omar, great question. Joel, great point. The lack of focus, lack of just wandering in the desert, if you will. Also, another thing to point out, for most of this season, all these missions, they actually go south, right? The one oh goodness gracious me, Dooku's planet. That one,
Sereno,
they lose all the treasure.
Yes.
This mining thing, they end up hitting the mine, but it's so explosive they have to. Who knows how much? I forget if they were able to extract anything. So that, I mean, the racing thing, they just break even.
Right.
so yeah,
it's the best win they got.
It's the closest they get. So that's a great point, Joel. I mean, in your point about them being aimless, and hopefully season 3 rather, they'll have this more focus because that they end up finding in this season. Here's the thing, that is not a metaphor or an analogy or an allegory, whatever. It's representative of the larger historical pattern. This is a question: who are the clones? This is a question we'll get into next week a little bit, hopefully. Who are the clones after Order 66? What does it mean to be a clone when your entire purpose, it's revealed, is just to help this dictator come to power? Now what do you do for those whose chips start failing or fading or whatnot? You're aimless, you're purposeless, even if you're not. I mean, everything to do with the Military Recruitment Act, that the clone's purpose is being taken away from them. The clones that find purpose, like Rex in the rebellion, they have this focus. And so that maybe, Joel, I mean, you just nailed it. Maybe that might be the story of this series, is that right there. Right on. Okay, we got to move on. Where am I in the notes? We got a bit of news. Got a bit of book news here. First up, very quickly, Secrets of the Wookiee. Speaking of a Bad Batch episode, on Kashyyyk, really wonderful Kashyyyk episode. There is going to be this in-universe reference book, Secrets of the Wookiees. Joel, you point out here in the notes, it looks similar to Secrets of the Sith, Secrets of the Jedi. It's in universe. It's a reference book. There are no cover. There's no cover yet. No further details. I don't know, when does it come out? Do we even know? Let me actually try and find this here. I don't know if we have a date, but
October 31st.
October 31st. Thank you. And so, but until then, we don't quite know. Except we can kind of guess. I mean, there's Bad Batch, the Bad Batch episode, as I mentioned. There's Jedi Fallen Order. A few more Kashyyyk episodes, I think. Is it in a High Republic story where they go on a Wookiee ship? But other than that, Gunji in his whole story, Buri, what's Arkoff in also in High Republic. There really isn't much in terms of the Wookiees, but there's so much that's being teased under the layers into the side of it. There's the holiday special. There's Life Day, but who knows how much that's canon? I don't know. Whatever. Actually, probably, here's my guess, is that this book is going to go into a bit of Life Day. That'll be also my guess. But anyway, there's lots that lots that's being teased, I think, under the surface that this book can finally dive into. So color me intrigued. Omar, do you have any thoughts or feels on Secrets of the Wookiees?
Unfortunately, not here. I haven't kept up at all with the High Republic or any current novels or anything paper canon at the moment. I'm all screen canon at the moment, but that's not to say I won't dip my toes whenever something pops up that's interesting. So, yeah.
I mean, it's a reference book. So, I mean,
that's right. It's a reference book. It
might deal with what about the droid attack on the Wookiees?
Oh, amazing! That's true. We really need to know that. Yeah.
Yeah. So there you go, Joel. What do you think of thoughts, feels?
I mean, I like these secrets books if it's the same people. They have beautiful artwork and stuff like that. And I think Wookiees as a species, as society, are probably some of the more fascinating and mythical world, and I feel like Kashyyyk is like much like Tatooine. I think if you expand it more in different ways, it could be quite a lived-in, mythical kind of magical forest planet. So I'm all about it.
Right on. We got the. There we go. Tell me more about Life Day. Yes.
Awesome.
Yeah. Thanks, Dan. I want to tell you more about Life Day, Dan. I'm assuming that's Dan there. Of Order 416. Got to rep that anyway. Yeah. So that'll be interesting to leaf through. I have Secrets of the Jedi. I don't have Secrets of the Sith. Joel, you have Secrets of the Sith.
Are those really big, like huge books? That are...
Yeah, they're thin, but
okay. I have them. I actually I was gifted them. Okay, I have both actually. That's awesome. Okay,
yeah, nice. Actually, and Secrets of the Jedi, like that's written by Luke, and it's kind of him going through. Is it Luke with notes by Rey or something? I have it. I've looked at it once.
No. It's that's not the notes one. It's just Luke telling his story.
Oh, okay. What am I thinking of?
You're thinking of Jedi,
the older one, right?
There was an older one, like the Sith, Secrets of the Sith.
Yeah.
No, not Secrets of the Sith. I forget, but I remember they're smaller books. These ones are bigger.
Yeah.
It's funny. I don't keep up with this, but I know exactly what you're talking about. Because it's interesting because they had all the notes by different people on like the corners of each of them. That one was really cool. So
yeah, this should be interesting again because there's so much less that's being explored about this. That and one of these things, it's not like if something's laid down in here that future storytelling has to follow it and has to be bound by it, but it could be a reason for an author or something to say, hey, this is a neat detail, I'm going to spin that out into a story. Why not? So
yeah,
in the meantime, it is kind of story, it's history, it's lore, which is also fun, even if it's not necessarily character. There we go. Speaking of a story that we are getting very soon, Jedi Battle Scars by Toronto's Sam Maggs got an excerpt that just dropped a few days ago. I got the Canadian flag for the CanCon. Got to rep the home. And Seer and Cal take on the fifth brother. Well, I'll just give my thoughts and then see what you guys think. So this was on Entertainment Weekly, and you can also hear the audiobook version of this excerpt. And I was intrigued that it's from Seer's point of view, that her experience with tapping into the Force. Of course, we know her tapping into the dark side is what gets her into so much trouble and why she shuts herself off. And so here she's more willing to tap into the Force, more willing to be a Jedi. And I think this is, of course, set between Jedi Fallen Order and Jedi Survivor. And it makes you wonder, is Seer going to be the main character? More likely, is the point of view going to jump around the ensemble with Seer and Cal and Marin and them, and Grizz, of course. Like in Convergence, Princess and the Scoundrel Brotherhood, that's been the trend. Sort of Princess and the Scoundrel, you have Han, Leia. I don't know if it's going to go that far, but it'll be interesting to get into Seer's head more because Fallen Order is all Cal, right?
Right.
I'll say, lightsaber and force action, that's really hard to narrate well. It's hard to, not always very easy to make it clear to follow, but Sam Maggs knocks it out of the park. She really writes it. I found this very clear and very easy to follow, to imagine in my head. And so that bodes well for what is a prequel to a video game, right? A prequel to, you actually see the action. You can see it. I can see it in my head. And similar, it's kind of like narrating a space battle. It's hard to do that. Hard to translate that kind of motion onto a written page. But I was impressed. Called me impressed there. I'm saying that. Joel, Omar, if you guys got a chance to read it, what did you guys think? I
don't think I did. I'm just excited for the book, though.
That's okay. Yeah, it's coming out March 7th. So not too long. So yeah,
I haven't read it either, but hey, I'm this is something that I'm super interested in. I'm curious about, and I want to know just how much it's going to affect the video game, because a topic I'm sure you guys are also very, very interested in is the connection between paper canon and screen canon, and this is absolutely one of those situations to where I'm curious, is some big plot point that's going to be in Jedi Survivor going to appear in this book? So I'm curious, but I'm also like trying my best not to see as much of Jedi Survivor as possible. And also, I haven't read this excerpt, so I'm really blind in the whole topic of this. But I'm curious. So
that's true. I mean, usually, sorry guys, this closer to a release of a story of a novel or a film, I usually go in blind myself. But this is a few weeks out. And then of course the video games late April.
Oh yeah.
So
they
pushed it, get it right. Interestingly, I mean, you bring that up. The fact that these are connected, Battle Scars, Survivor, the Fallen Order comic and the Fallen Order video game. So it's partly why I keep thinking about this and keep talking about this. Video games to me are still paper canon.
Oh really?
In my mind, I know, because it doesn't have so much to do with the medium. It doesn't even have much to do with popularity. It has to do with how willing the storytellers are to. It has to do with continuity, and connect things. And video games have intentionally incorporated plot points and being connected to plot points from novels and comics far more than streaming series have. And so, I mean, the Battlefront 2 and the Aftermath, that's the big example. So
that's interesting.
Yeah, so it's why I tend to say, okay, video games are paper canon. I mean, it could be wrong. It could be they could go in a different direction, but that's how it's been so far.
That's very interesting, because the way I've seen it, and kind of because I've also thought about it as well, because every video game that we've recently had has always had some kind of paper canon tie-in. Except for Squadrons. I don't know if Squadrons, if you want to count like Alphabet Squadron.
Alphabet Squadron had it had comic book.
It had Oh, that's right. It did. So there's already been kind of like a paper canon tie-in to these. So that's why I've kind of sorted in my head. It's at least loosely it's on screen canon. But I can understand that as well, because it is very. The video games is such a different medium than TV and film, and sometimes they don't always interlap as much as, or at least the fandom wise, it doesn't always interlap as much as we think. So So
Joel, I mean, what are you looking forward to this novel? I know you're likely going to go.
I'm excited. Regardless of titles, I think at the very least it's going to be like a little bridge between here's this game. This book's going to happen, and then the second game happens somewhere. I'm excited. Bring it on.
And honestly, I mean, are you guys? We're all seeing this. Were you disappointed by the announcement of the delay, or do you feel like, okay, get it right?
No, I'm pretty much totally fine with it. I even tweeted out, I think I said something along the lines of like, oh, great, now I have more time to save up for a PS5. That is exactly what I'm doing. I'm still selling my books, by the way, so shout out to that. No, but yeah, exactly. I'm totally fine with it. Hey, spend more time to really iron out some things. I do remember getting Jedi Fallen Order. And there are a few things that maybe like could have been smoothed out. Maybe if they had like a little extra time. It's still a great game, still ran great. But just very minor, tiny little things. And so I'm always going to be down for that. And especially this wasn't a pushback that was like end of the year. You actually have to wait for it, or a whole year later or anything like that. This was just a month. It was
a month, just over a month, right?
Just over a month. So it's
40
fine.
days or so.
I'm fine with that. Just refine it. People can talk about Mando. There's going to be Star Wars to be talked about.
This is true. Mando and Battle Scars.
And Battle Scars.
And Book of and Bad Batch is still good. But and Battle Scars. Yeah. I mean, that'll give me time to get through it. Bit of a slow reader. Dan says, bring back Ccanon.
There you go.
I mean, in a way, I wonder if there are probably folks who video games are the only thing they do with Star Wars at all.
I'm sure.
So there we go.
Sure.
All right, one last bit of news to go through. Kevin Scott doing what he does best, Tales from the Death Star. This is from a Michael Siglain tweet. Tweeted out, and this is, I gather, also from the Dark Horse materials as well. Michael Siglain, of course, the head honcho of Lucasfilm Publishing. Because it's never too soon for Halloween, Kevin Scott, the master of terrifying tales, returns for more scary stories set in a galaxy far, far away, with Star Wars Tales from the Death Star coming this September from Dark Horse Comics. This is our most EC-like anthology yet. Beware.
Mhm.
This also raises the question, what are EC comics? I actually didn't know. In the thread, he explains it. In the 1950s, EC Comics Entertainment Comics under publisher William Gaines was responsible for some of the greatest horror and sci-fi comics ever made. Tales from the Crypt, The Vault of Horror, The Haunt of Fear, weird fantasy, weird science. Check him out. So, I mean, that tells me, I mean, that's Kevin's whole inspiration for a lot of what he's done. Not so much, probably even some of his High Republic stuff, High Republic comics, but especially Tales from Vader's Castle, Ghosts of Vader's Castle, Return to Vader's Castle. I know the Lego Halloween special, which is very much owes a lot to
it does.
to especially Tales from Vader's Castle, just the whole scenario there, as well as and so now not just the Vader's Castle, now it's the Death Star. Get this, guys. You're gonna see what I do here. Looks like the Death Star is more than just a technological terror. There you go. Hope the check's in the mail first. Come on.
Great. There you go. Pay him.
What do you think of this? I don't know if you've gotten a chance to read any of his other
I have.
tales from.
They're very, very easy reads, and they're very, very quick, very nice, very cute. I don't know. I like them. I like them a lot. But that's kind of as much as I can really say about it. They're a fun little thing to have occasionally, and Kevin Scott is a great writer, so I always enjoy his miniseries when I pick them up. So I'm probably gonna check this one out too.
Yes, it very much. I mean, to also say it's Dark Horse. It was what was that? Like the publisher? Oh my goodness, the publisher. IDW. Yes. The Adventures. It was Adventures. Star Wars Adventures. Right. So be younger readers, but like the fun horror that they give to younger readers. I guess that I never got into, but I've read these ones. Yeah, like Joel, what do you think of this news and of setting out the Death Star specifically?
Yeah, I find that a really interesting setting. Vader's castle is already spooky. Spooky Sith castle. Death Star. I'm kind of curious what they want to kind of say. Ooh, what's spooky about it? Although there is like a Dianoga in there. If you know what Dianoga looks like, they're horrifying. Nightmare fuel. So there's that. But no, I'm very curious what kind of stories they will tell on the Death Star. I'm looking forward to it. Maybe I'll check it out. I haven't really had time to read these ones per se, but they're cute and I hear good things. So
maybe something about the kyber crystals doing something weird. You never know. You never know. All right. Okay, so that does it for news. Before we dive in, I'm gonna try and get this up here. Bring this up here. So let's see. Where is this thing? Where is this? Here we go. There we go. Guys, it's time to talk the sequel trilogy. 7, 8, 9.
Yeah, those films.
7, 8, 9. 1, 2, 3. 7, 8, 9. All right, there's the bit. 7, there we go. I'm 9. Done. You can keep singing if you want. That was a bit of a. For those who don't know what that is, that's reference to the flagship Star Wars Underworld. Back when they were audio only, and talking about production news from the sequel trilogy. And so I thought I'd give a nice little nod to that. But Joel, yes, take it away.
I missed that. Yes, sequels and prequels. There's no prequel song. 1, 2, 3.
I threw it in. 1, 2, 3, 7, 8, 2, 3.
It doesn't sound catchy. Prequels, sequels. There's always been a criticism from some, like the sequels they're too OT heavy. They ignore the prequels, all that stuff. I mean, to be fair, would have loved to see Naboo, and I would have loved to see Coruscant again. Like that final battle above Coruscant would have been pretty epic. Not gonna lie. But I think that's a lot of just tangible prequel references. Things that we can see, like Naboo. It is a prequel place. I love Naboo. Don't get me wrong. Naboo's great. Would love to see it again on screen.
Yeah, absolutely.
But people, I think, need to look beyond the tangible, beyond this crude matter, as Master Yoda would say. and look
Exactly.
beyond to the thematics. And Omar, we have you here because a long time ago in a Twitter world, not so far away, I remember you for a tweet. I don't remember exactly if this is word for word, but you said something along the lines of like the sequels are more sequels to the prequels than people justify. So we'll start off with what you said, and Omar, would you like to explain to us what that means?
Yeah, absolutely. So you have such a good memory because I forgot I had tweeted that out, and then just today I actually went back and like looked for those tweets because I knew I said that, but I couldn't remember exactly what I said. But essentially, it's the concept of that, like exactly as you were kind of saying. People really wanted more prequel representation in the sequels, and hey, I'm one of those too, But I have to admit that if we were to have gotten some like direct like conversation or anything referencing the prequels, it's all aesthetics, it's not necessarily anything above aesthetic, an aesthetically pleasing serotonin being sent into your brain of, oh, they said the thing, fan service, that's the word.
Which isn't bad, but
but it's not. And look, I'll say it right now, I would have loved like a glimpse into Coruscant or a glimpse into whatever. But I do think that you can look at the sequels in the themes and in a thematic way where you can say, I could see some through lines here. And in particular, now for me, like the bulk of it is actually in The Rise of Skywalker, the one that kind of sets off to close the entire Skywalker saga. And in doing so, it kind of gets up and has to look at the entire Skywalker saga in order to do so. And I had always thought in my head that The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi, they do something very specific in looking at Star Wars, the original trilogy particularly, in a meta lens, and where it kind of critiques it. Maybe it looks at it through a thesis, an antithesis, and then a synthesis of ideas of saying like, Star Wars is typically like this. Oh, but also Star Wars can be a little different. It can be. Let's actually look at these archetypes and story elements in a more critical lens, and then at the end coming together and saying, well, it can be both. It can be a story about hope, but we can also like still be a little critical on ideas of that are very tropey. That's that to me. And by the way, interrupt me if you guys want to. I'm gonna ramble. And
go ahead.
Yeah,
we like listening.
Yeah.
I need a break from talking.
So like to me, that pretty much encompasses what's going on with The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi. I think they're great. They're a great duology of films that cover that. Now, when it gets to The Rise of Skywalker, that's when it starts actually looking at that's when it starts to look at the entire trilogy. And sorry, give me 1 second.
Oh dear. Well, I'll
no, I'm fine. Sorry. I had to cough, and so give me a second. I'm going to keep on talking and keep on explaining because essentially what is going on in my mind when it comes to The Rise of Skywalker and kind of what it does differently than all of the other films is it's looking at the entire story from Luke Skywalker to Anakin Skywalker, and it is saying like, how can we have this through line through the entire thing? And sorry, give me 1 second. I'm gonna step back. If you can talk a little bit, Joel.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. No, I agree 100%. There's an old saying, art isn't made in a vacuum. And we all always say, oh, you should watch, and this actually kind of goes back to like watching in chronological order, watching it in release order. And this is one of the reasons why I kind of always somewhat advocate for release order in just a meta sense, is that a sequel trilogy made after the original trilogy would not have looked the way it does. Right. Because of those influences of the prequels, regardless, the closest thing is probably maybe the original Thrawn trilogy itself, but even then there's a little bit of interesting things there. But no, you're back, Omar, so continue your...
No. So specifically, there are two things I wanted to say about The Rise of Skywalker and how it connects through the sequel trilogy. One, let's talk about Palpatine, because I think Palpatine is such an interesting addition that J.J. Abrams decided to include. And in particular, the idea of the opera scene that he famously loves. He loves the opera scene, and he basically, what did he call it?
Who doesn't?
He called it like the perfect setup. And that's exactly what it was. It was the perfect setup for this idea of for this idea of him coming back, and kind of a way to tie into the Darth Plagueis narrative, which is very
which we talked about a couple episodes ago.
Right. And just the concept of immortality and what that means to the Jedi and the Sith. So therein lies one connection that I think is very important. And also, I don't know if you guys have thought about this or have talked about this before, but in regards to one of the lines in the Darth Plagueis conversation, it's when he says the idea of that, he used it to create life. That very specific quote, to create life.
Life.
Right. And I know that was leftover from a whole idea of like, is Anakin midichlorians? Is Anakin a creation of, it was an abandoned concept. So, but still, in this context, I do love how in The Rise of Skywalker, there's a connection there when he sees the dyad and them come together. And he calls it a power like life itself. And it's this connection I don't see made a lot, but I would love for there to be more future stories, maybe focusing on like just what that could mean. And I'm always pushing for like a something Darth Plagueis related, or something right before the prequels that maybe kind of delves into Darth Plagueis and whatnot. But Palpatine and the opera scene is that right there is a huge connection that kind of connects this very meta way of looking at Star Wars to the rest of the prequels and the original trilogy, and kind of puts it all together. And Joel, you were talking about just how we have like what is the best order to watch these? And if I can ask, what did y'all say on that? What, in your opinion, is do we have an agreement here?
Yeah,
I know.
We disagree.
I think we disagree. I mean, I'm always kind of in the camp of watch the way you want to watch. That's sort of my general general view. It's like I don't really have a hard line. I mean, I'm watching it I'm showing a friend who doesn't really know Star Wars in chronological order, because that's the way they want to watch it.
Okay.
Which is fine. My argument for release order is always kind of more, I want to look at it from an out of universe perspective of like Star Wars is the original 77. They had no idea they were going to get a sequel, and then sort of the evolution of this franchise from thing George Lucas had no idea, was banking all his money on, to biggest thing in the universe, now owned by the Disney Corporation. So that's kind of my Matthew's more of a chronological order. I did get you to like, though, Russian doll order. So
I didn't mind that one. And interesting, you talk about Russian doll order and bringing up this whole connection between Anakin as the Virgins, as this. I mean, in the Plagueis novel, saying this spontaneous response of the Force to Plagueis and Palpatine, Sidious messing with life.
Right.
The dyad as Rey, especially, but also but the bond between Rey and Ben as this powerful source of life or not source of life, but so again, another spontaneous burst of the Force awakening and and rising up to meet the growing dark that again, Palpatine monkeying with the natural order of life and death and saying the natural order of life and death, that my favorite scene of the sequel trilogy, Rey on the rock, recognizing that this natural order is of life and death and decay that leads to new life, is itself death, even itself, as a necessary condition for new life to emerge. And Palpatine saying, no, I'm going to just control that. And the way I have to control that is through any means necessary, and it matters how many planets I destroy matters how many people I run over, because the more the merrier.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's a fascinating connection. I hadn't fully thought of that.
Right.
But it definitely intuitively makes sense. The dyad especially.
Yeah, exactly. And so first of all, hi Hannah, because he's a hi Omar. But second of all, yes, that does bring me into it's a connection I haven't seen a lot of people make, and only because it's just potential for more stories that need to happen within this era. But yeah, so as I was saying about the like specific order, I think because of that reason, and I would like for release order, in my opinion, is the order for the sequel trilogy.
As in, like, release order for the whole saga for the sake of the sequel trilogy. Okay.
Now there are other reasons, because I do think A New Hope opens with well, it doesn't open with it, but you get that scene early on of Luke looking at the binary sunset, and then years later it ends with Rey on the binary sunset. So there is a book start and book end kind of quality to that. But that aside, there is the idea of like watching Revenge of the Sith and then going straight into the sequel trilogy that I think it can benefit that read. I like having Revenge and Rise of Skywalker pretty close, even though there's like 2 movies in between. It's still relatively close, and it's in your mind whenever you're doing a rewatch of it. And last but not least, and another very important aspect of why I think the sequels are as connected to the prequels as maybe not a lot of people would come to think, is the idea of Kylo Ren. And I think
we'll get to that one. We'll get to Ren.
But no, I think
okay, go ahead.
Sorry, because gotta move on. But
no, so like when it comes to Kylo Ren, very specifically, when he first came out, a lot of people had the conversation of, oh, he's just Darth Vader light. It's just, but he is a character that is meant for you to take a look in a meta perspective and look at both Darth Vader and prequel Anakin. Like he's meant for you to look at both of them through this lens of a single character. And you really get to see how he goes into, he kind of has like a reverse arc. And I think that was actually said before by Adam Driver, I think. Or he said something along the lines of like he really tries to play it as like a reverse arc in terms of who Darth Vader was. I think it was Adam Driver who said it. I don't know if you guys can.
Well, it sounds familiar for sure.
Yeah.
I remember Jason Fry saying he wrote it like a reverse hero's journey for the Last Jedi novel, but maybe that was something else.
Okay, I'll have to do research on that again, but at the very least, I do read it as that, and especially when it gets to the Rise of Skywalker, and you have 2 very pivotal moments, and that kind of goes into, I think the Rise of Skywalker, it does a lot to cover some of the Skywalker saga's maybe discrepancies that maybe I feel like could have been smoothed over a little more. Like the whole Leia thing. Like I love that Leia is a Skywalker. I never bought it in the moment of Return of the Jedi. And here I feel like it's utilized to its fullest potential. Like you see Leia as a Jedi, and in a large way, Leia kind of saves the day and alters Palpatine's plan. And Rey picks up where Leia left off by taking her saber and then defeating evil. So like that in itself does a lot for Leia. And in the same way, I think Kylo has a very similar thing with Anakin. With the prequels, narratively, it kind of adds two moments with Anakin that kind of adds to his overall character and how you view him in the original trilogy. And that is the fact that he lost his mother. So now you have the idea when watching Darth Vader in the original trilogy, this is a character who lost his mother, and he acts out of revenge and he acts out of rage. And you really can't see him a different way. And then the prequels also add Padme. And of course, we already know like exactly what Padme means to him and how that changes things in the original trilogy. People start saying that like Luke, redeeming his father is like, it's out of that familial love, and that's out of like Padme. That's a familial love that is there because of Padme. So like, So you have that together. Those are two very distinct moments that the prequels technically added. And now you have Kylo Ren, and he similarly has these two moments as well in The Rise of Skywalker. Now, you have the death of the mother, exactly the same as what happens. But whereas in the prequels, you have this moment where Anakin just delves deeper into the darkness, into his rage. You have the opposite for Ben. You have the complete opposite. You could argue this is the moment where he even like starts to become Ben Solo, and he starts to think over the things before he starts talking to his father figure, or his actual father figure, Han Solo. So you have that moment there. And then,
true
of course,
hero Han Solo.
The true hero Han Solo.
Yeah.
I just have to speak. I don't want.
Go ahead.
I'll interrupt you. I don't want to go 4 minutes and just say, like everyone says, Ben Solo wanted to be like Darth Vader because he secretly wanted to be like Anakin. I've kind of been the opposite. I always feel like if Ben Solo wanted to be like anyone, I feel like he looked up to his dad. I feel like he's like Han Solo is his hero. Like I think deep down, like I don't think of like being this chosen one lightsaber. I feel like being my rough and tumble dad who's driving the Millennium Falcon and just
I mean, when you see him. Well, I was just going to say, that moment after he turns and he goes down into Exegol, I mean, the way he just his demeanor, his scruff, his kind of diving head first into the conflict, that's totally Han. I mean, yes, with the Force. Yes, with the ability to use a lightsaber, but very much that mentality. That Snoke really discouraged, young Solo, too much of your father. He embraces it. He leans into it, and that's it is a beautiful moment there.
Right.
But keep going.
And I feel like the Padme one is even more apparent in my opinion. I made a tweet kind of recently about this parallel that in my opinion, I see very vividly, and it's the one scene in Revenge of the Sith where Anakin is choking Padme, like just straight on choking her in front of. And you could arguably say that is where that's where he lost her. That's where like he fully lost her. Like he after that moment, he never sees her again, and he even finds out that she passes away later. Now you can make the argument as to whether he is responsible for her death, and there's plenty of conversations about like who is responsible for exactly her death and how she died. It doesn't matter. Because in the end, that was the last interaction he had with her, and now she's dead. And so because of that, he lost his love because of the selfishness that he has in him. And the sequels, you have the very opposite of that. You have a moment where Ben comes and finds Rey, who is the closest person that he has been at the moment. He does something that completely mirrors and reflects and does the opposite of what Anakin would have done. But in the same way, he honors his legacy, and that's by saving the person that he cares for and selflessly giving up his life in order to save them. So
and I'll add, I wrote in my notes about this, Padme's death makes the galaxy a worse place, but Rey living in the galaxy makes the galaxy a better place. I don't want to get too much into like, oh, we're galaxy doesn't need you, Ben Solo, go away. I'm not gonna say that. But in that sense, yes, and it's fascinating because Rise of Kylo Ren comic aside, we don't know much about Ben's fall and kind of how it kind of more happened. We see the catalyst of kind of like certainly the tipping point, and obviously that job we know what.
And that comic is just a short, little, very quick.
Right.
I don't even think it's like the full true story of how he fell. I just feel like it's just the events that just kind of like made everything go wrong.
Issue. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
But I think it's fascinating that Ben has the fall, but yet when Ben is confronted with the two kind of big things that led to Anakin's ultimate demise, he's a better person out of it than Anakin, who just kind of went to the dark side. But I want to turn it over to Matthew for a second, if you're good, Omar. And what are your thoughts? I know Anakin, your favorite character, and big chosen one fan here.
And the big question of the relationship between Anakin and Vader and all that. And it's interesting. I hadn't even connected that too much in terms of Ben in episode 9. I mean, maybe put it this way, is that episode 9, Rise of Skywalker, is Ben Solo's prequel trilogy, if you will.
Yes.
The Last Jedi is Rey's prequel trilogy, if you will. Rey and Luke navigating through, and so I mean, it's fascinating to hear this other perspective, because to my mind, The Last Jedi is the most prequelist thing to happen in the entire Disney era, not counting Clone Wars season 7, which is set during Revenge of the Sith. But in terms of meditating on different aspects of the prequel trilogy, I mean, I'm intrigued to hear this whole question about life, midi-chlorians. I mean, even to see, even to say some of the strains of Colin Trevorrow's concept or idea, the dyad. I'm intrigued by that. I mean, I'm excited by the idea that the dyad is itself. I'd love to hear a novel. I don't know if Ray Carson does this, but I'd love to see a novel or something that actually goes into dyads and provides some more, not so much a lore dump, but maybe something in High Republic might do this. I don't know.
I would absolutely love that. Yeah,
because I mean, a response to monkeying with it. I will say, it's an agree to disagree kind of thing in terms of which is the more prequelist of the sequel films. Because maybe here's what it is. It's the aspects of the prequels that maybe I latch onto more, namely the legacy of the Jedi, the whether or not I'll bring this one up here. That the fact that Luke says he says at the height of their powers they let Darth Sidious rise from the Empire and wipe him out. Yoda later on, the greatest teacher failure is meditating on those questions of the failure of the Jedi during the Clone Wars, the whether or not the Jedi are evil and it's time for them to end. And then Rey coming and saying, no, there's this other strain here of the Qui-Gon Ahsoka strain, but I think even Obi-Wan and Yoda especially still carried on this theme of that there was this weight of tradition. Then in the books, she grabs the books that say, this is how we win, not by killing what we hate, by saving what we love, which Ben does, as you mentioned. Ben totally does in Rise of Skywalker. So, I mean, I'll say the questions that Last Jedi brings up are the questions about our real world in terms of religious traditions and political communities that
I think
that Rian Johnson really dives into. And so, even the question of, is Luke's cynicism ultimately correct? Again, maybe it's just the things that animate me more about the prequels that Ryan latched onto.
These are more conceptual questions, and I think Tross goes into more just personal, maybe character-driven stuff.
Yeah, maybe that's certainly part of it. Although, I mean, with Rey, her character story in finding, I mean, this kind of like I was talking about with the Bad Batch and finding a focus after Order 66. Rey in this galaxy finding the soul of the Jedi that is obscured by their involvements in the Clone Wars and the shroud of the dark side that has fallen on them, able to carry on that new hope through the dark times into the age of the Empire, with the guy who is called the New Hope right in front of him saying it's time for the Jedi to end. One of the things that what I'm getting at here is, again, this is another thing that came up with Din and Dom the other day is, Last Jedi, especially like the prequels, is this litmus test of, are you despairing or are you hopeful?
It really is.
And whether or not you what you latch on to, what you're, I mean, the everyone's response to The Last Jedi, I think, is incredibly illustrative of how they feel about religious traditions, about what heroism is and what the good guys are, and that's again, that's the thing about the prequels that I find most fascinating is George's ability to explore that question,
right?
With, includes the Jedi. Are the Jedi heroic? Well, no, they're at the height of their powers. They let Darth Sidious rise from the Empire and wipe them out,
right?
But also carry on the seed of hope that ultimately allows Anakin Skywalker to return and destroy the Sith. And so, yeah, I mean, again, that's an interesting distinction, Joe, that you make about how Rise of Skywalker is the more the oogly googly mythical stuff, especially with the opera scene, which is really fascinating. Again, I love it.
Right.
But also Last Jedi, maybe it's a bit more grounded, maybe a bit more Western.
I go the other way. I think Last Jedi is the other way.
Western.
Right.
But like
I like to go the
Western
opposite
in terms
way.
of Western. I'll let you get to that in a second, Joe. As in Western theology, Western tradition of questions about the role of institutions, pursuing good and evil, and that. But Joel, you go for it if you have a thought.
No, I think it's the opposite. I think Last Jedi is more mythical and big concepts, and I think Rise of Skywalker is more character driven in that regard, in a weird way. It's a bit more, I don't want to say narrow focus. That sounds insulting. But no, it's more tightly focused on like how Ben sold a mirror to Anakin. Is how Reylo sort of.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I agree with that point. What I mean is, Last Jedi is a little more philosophical, whereas Rise of Skywalker has the weird science cloning stuff.
Yes, sure. That's
kind of what
I could agree there too. Yeah,
that's fair. Yeah. I wanted to add to Omar's point about the meta, though, and to your point about Last Jedi. Again, this is where we can't agree. I do think without prequels, we don't have Last Jedi because if you were to make a sequel to the original trilogy and have Luke Skywalker be all, "Oh, Jedi suck," I don't think that's going to work in just the sense of like people still had positive views about the Jedi. It wasn't really until after the prequels where you kind of had the kind of both the more philosophical discourse and then just the online discourse of like, Jedi suck now. They're space cops. They suck. They got what they coming to them. They screwed Anakin. Which is
also, I think, a cynical projection, frankly. But anyway, keep going.
But look who they gave it to. They gave it to Luke Skywalker, who is kind of the representative of that viewpoint. And I would argue it's representative of almost like an older generation of fans who like thought George screwed over the Jedi when he made the prequels. And Rey, of course, being the younger one as well. But Omar, I think you look like you have a point. So
so I just kind of want to add to this entire conversation in terms of. So I used to think that Rey was a character who, in a meta perspective, like she saw the original trilogy. I mean, she knows who Han Solo is. She knows who Leia is, and she knows who Luke Skywalker is. So she grew up with stories. So in a way, she saw the original trilogy, and she loves that idea of hope, and that's why a lot of maybe the Force things kind of came more naturally to her. So because she's a hopeful person, and on the opposite side of things, Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi is a character who saw the prequels and came away with a very cynical view of it's the Jedi's fault.
Yes.
And they clash in The Last Jedi where they have their scene and they're kind of discussing and like
literally that conversation.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's how I viewed that's how I viewed that moment for quite a long time. But in recent years, or in recent year, maybe to say, I kind of recently kind of evolved that a little bit when I've been researching views of the prequels, because I actually think George Lucas, and maybe I've talked about this before, George Lucas and Dave Filoni, I don't think they see the exact same thing when it comes to the prequels. I mean, obviously, because I think Dave Filoni kind of goes in this very internet discussion kind of in regards to like, we all see it as like the Jedi are this increasingly flawed order, while George Lucas it does make a point to say like that they are increasingly flawed, but that isn't the entire story. That isn't the entirety of the story that he is saying. So I do think there's a distinction. I wish I had some quotes, because there's this one Tumblr that has excellent quotes in regards
to the Buddha
one. Is it? I don't know.
Yeah, I think I know what you're talking about. Because I feel like it's basically I think I know what you're talking about. Because I feel like you kind of have two camps of people after the prequels, and we even saw it with some of our author friends. I think the writer of Africa kind of has this, where you have one camp that says Anakin's fall is his own fault. You did this yourself, buddy. You're yourself to blame. Don't be blaming Obi-Wan or the Jedi. You did yourself dirty. Then you got the other camp who's very much the Jedi are to blame. It's the Jedi's fault. Anakin fell. You know, he's not responsible for his own actions. Anakin Skywalker did nothing wrong.
I mean, there is that.
Barasofi did nothing wrong.
Yeah,
exactly.
There is that aspect of it. I also think there is just the whole point of it is there's a faith in the Jedi that in a way has kind of been lost since the prequels. And I'm talking in a very like fandom wise, where like, people no longer have that faith that maybe was there before the prequels, where the Jedi were this very mystified thing. And a lot of people cite the fact that, now we actually demystify the Jedi and stuff. I think it's less that. I think it's more the conversation about like what the Jedi do in the prequels and stuff. I think that's kind of, I think the sequel trilogy kind of looks at that conversation and puts it in front of everyone. And it says like, look, here is a character who embodies hope, has normally embodied hope, has lost all hope for the Jedi. And here is Rey, who is a character who is new eyes, fresh-faced, and has only hope. And so here's that conversation played out to you in a movie. And I think it's really ballsy that they do that. That is one of the reasons why I think Last Jedi for me is like one of my favorite Star Wars films.
Me too,
exactly. And I do cite that a lot. So in that regards, yes, there is a lot of prequelist themes inside of The Last Jedi. And at the very least, Rian Johnson does something very similar to George Lucas in that, like, okay, let's take a look at this age-old story and analyze it through this kind of lens. And Rian Johnson does that, and George Lucas does it to himself with the prequels. And but working backwards and once working forward. So it's interesting. It's really
Omar. You mentioned Dave and George kind of maybe not seeing eye to eye, and I'm actually someone who kind of have always sort of felt that. Everyone says, Dave Filoni's George Lucas' Padawan, so that must mean Dave Filoni thinks the way George Lucas thinks. I've actually never agreed with that sentiment. I actually think there are a lot of things they might actually disagree on. And you can kind of even see it in small ways, too. Like, George Lucas never wanted to develop Count Dooku, and Tales of the Jedi, on screen at least, made Count Dooku very much a third-dimensional character, and if they've really gone into it. But
and Lucasfilm greenlit Kevin Scott's novel, too.
Well,
audio
yeah.
Oh yeah, but
no doubt.
I'd be curious, Omar, where you think there are examples in stories, if you can remember any, where they do different. Like, where do you kind of see it? Like, I'm just kind of curious, like, where would you? If you can think of a specific example, I'd love to hear it.
Right, I just brought that up, and I wish I had that one article that I had that kind of went more into it. But just off the bat, I'm thinking just the idea of attachment. Attachment itself is a real world thing. Like it's a very Buddhist like discussion that's going on there, and it's almost one for one plopped from Buddhism and then placed into the Jedi Order. And a lot of people are very critical of it and how the Jedi kind of view things and stuff. At the same time, that's a real world thing that like Buddhists actually do. And
there are, and also Western. I mean, in a similar way.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So no. Yeah, exactly.
Like the Solidity question. Yeah.
So it is interesting that a lot of people are very critical of the Jedi, saying, I can't believe you can't have love and can't form attachments and all this stuff, when like this is a thing that actually exists in our real world and people follow it, and like it's a religion to them, and you're basically kind of telling them like literally like the Jedi are wrong and so are those. No, let's not say that, because again, he literally is doing one for one kind of the same thing.
Yeah.
So, and to connect this with the whole Dave Filoni thing, I think Dave and a number of individuals online are really critical of the Jedi. And not to say you're not supposed to be critical of the Jedi, but just I think you're supposed to be critical of the Jedi in not exactly the focus is in the wrong place, I think, essentially. Whereas a lot of people say, like, okay, the Jedi were wrong, and the end conclusion that they end up having is, okay, we shouldn't have Jedi. That's missing the point. And because George Lucas presented everything in a way to say, like, the Jedi are still heroes, but outside factors really incorporated itself into them that made things suck and made things fall apart. Again, it was the dark side that blinded a lot of their vision with the Force and a lot of their connectivity to the Force, and that was all Palpatine. So it because of that reason, that's why I say that I think there's a disconnect, because there are individuals who maybe have the opinion like, okay, the Jedi need to move on and continue from this, and then there are people that, even watching The Last Jedi, come to the conclusion, oh, the Jedi do have to end, when the bad guy was the one who said that.
Yeah.
Right.
So
I think I have a good example maybe of where you're coming from. A while ago, I was on the forums just looking up stuff, seeing what people say. And, it's like, oh, is Qui-Gon Jinn the ideal Jedi? We've always kind of had that opinion here. Right. And one person said, I think Kanan is the ideal Jedi. I think kind of Kanan is sort of, and I think that's kind of maybe Filoni pushing that a little, where in his mind, someone like a Kanan is more of an ideal Jedi than, say, Qui-Gon.
Right.
Kanan had Hera and his family, the attachments.
Yeah.
Baby on the way.
Yeah.
And Qui-Gon, Qui-Gon was never about, hey, I think Jedi should marry and make love to each other. Like he was very still. I'm okay with letting go. So I think there's definitely that.
Yeah, there's definitely a bit of element, and this isn't a whole thing to say like creatives shouldn't view Star Wars differently. Sure. And like I'm all for different views of Star Wars and being told within the Star Wars universe. I already view a lot of these stories that we see as like people's interpretations of maybe things that are, not exactly how they play out in canon. So it doesn't matter. I
want to jump in. It's interesting to bring up the whole attachments question, and I'm just thinking about this. The sequels don't really address it at all.
They don't. You're right. Yeah,
because it isn't actually the most important thing. It's a surface thing that represents the circumstances that the Jedi are in, the Jedi of the Late Republic and the High Republic are in at the time. Kanan, in his own way, explores it because they're in a different circumstance.
Right.
Luke in The Mandalorian and Book of Boba Fett, he explores it for sure. But with Rey, it isn't really that big of a deal because I'll say this. She never takes that as a form of cynicism, as a reason for cynicism.
Right.
Because it's almost to say, that was then, and this is now. I have these attachments to, especially to Finn and Poe and to Leia. That actually, at the beginning of Rise of Skywalker, Poe calls her out on that and says, "Where are you? What are you up to right now? Your friends need your help here."
Right.
And then, of course, with Ben, reconnecting with him, even The Last Jedi, using that burgeoning attachment as a way of drawing him back to the light. But it's I think a lot of those internet warriors would have wanted Luke especially to say, here's the thing, Luke doesn't actually address it at all. Luke doesn't say, oh, the Jedi because of their sex repulsed celibacy allowed Palpatine Sidious to rise. He says because of their arrogance, because of their belief that they had their vanity in that they had control over not control of the Force, but that they had this possession, this special possession of the Force, of the light, as opposed to we see with Qui-Gon submitting to the light. Qui-Gon also someone who doesn't develop any doesn't really have anything to do with attachment or not either. I mean, I do think in the actual story we get of the prequel trilogy, I think there are attachments all over the place.
Oh yeah,
especially between Obi-Wan and Anakin. that as an attachment.
Why did I think you were going to say Obi-Wan and Dex? I don't know why I
What
thought
is
you
that? That's an attachment. No,
That's
but
an
that's an attachment
attachment.
too.
It
That is one.
absolutely is. Yeah.
It happens anyways. I will say this. You know, it is interesting. So, Omar, I mean, I mentioned this a few times, I think, and way back to all my FCSA days. I mean, I really appreciate that you said, okay, for George, question of attachment and detachment is a very Eastern conversation. It is, yes, it is the red clad bald monks who go off in the mountain, the Himalayas, and I mean it's not everybody. Obviously, there are Buddhist monks all over the world, and they have a very strong.
But it is. It's a very Eastern concept, and from my own like research and stuff, I'm not going to claim I'm an expert on this in any regards. Like it's all about how you deal with loss and how you yourself as a person deal with it, and you can connect that to a lot of things with Star Wars because loss is a part of life. And when you have that loss, do you fuel that energy into anger, sadness, all this stuff, or do you say, okay, I'm going to keep on living for that person?
I have a question for Omar, and then it relates back to what.
Can I actually just finish?
Oh
my
no, go
point?
ahead. Yeah,
I just want to finish my point. Yeah. Unless Omar, you have a point. You were
no, that was it.
Russian doll points here.
All right, you go first, Matt.
Go ahead.
So for maybe this is this weird disconnect for George. The question of detachment is Eastern. The opposition, the automatic assumption. Here's my bias is coming. I work for a Roman Catholic media company, so this is coming up. The opposition to the automatic assumption that the Jedi fell to the dark side because they're sex repressed. The opposition to that is very Western. It's very much in a way Protestant. I mean, I'm not actually Catholic myself. I'm Protestant. I'm part of the Protestant church where clergy can get married, monks can't. We have monks; they don't get married. Priests can, but there's still respect for celibacy as a commitment to the community. The way the Jedi, the way we actually see with the Jedi primarily, but it's this weird thing where the opposition to it is very Western. And so it's also, I will say, Yoda hugely drops the ball on the cushion scene with Anakin, right? In that question of how you deal with loss. Right. He says, carve it out of you, get rid of it. It's no good. It's useless to our goals and our aims as an order. That's got to be one of the failures Force Ghost is talking about in my other favorite scene of the sequel trilogy, where he burns the friggin' tree down and says, Luke, focus on who is in front of you right now. And the possibility of attachments and the attachment to his sister and recapturing that. I mean, that's another interesting thing is you want to talk about attachments. Luke has detached himself from everyone and everything. Yeah. He's literally an island. I mean, but he's on an island. Sorry, go ahead.
Kind of from day one, like Princess and the Scoundrel, like Leia can tell, like, oh, you're gonna be a lonely guy, Luke. And obviously, I know in Legends they're like, we want Luke and Mara Jade and Ben Skywalker, right? The Skywalker family to lead the Cade.
But things have been set up. There's gonna be no marriage tomorrow. Mara Jade might come back, but Luke's
she might.
No, and that's the thing is in the circumstances that Kanan finds himself in, circumstances that Rey finds herself in at the end of Skywalker, the absolute requirement for celibacy just doesn't make sense anymore. You have to find a family somehow. But one last thing. Sorry, High Republic. I promise. I'm done after this.
Okay, fine.
It just came in. High Republic really is exploring this because they let Padawans just experiment and try things out, suck face, or go off on an adventure with a circus performer. Literally, there's a Padawan who goes off on an adventure with a circus performer, and they're a couple for a little bit, and then they come back. The Padawan comes back, and realizes, no, I'm ready to be a knight now, and I'm ready to commit to this community, this family, and
You know, I don't want to get too much into like what Rey's future is, but I could see Rey as being like, you know what, I kind of don't care about the celibacy, not celibacy. Like, if I want to do it, I'll do it. But you know, like I got, you know, maybe it'll happen, maybe it won't. But I do wonder. I have a question for Omar about the attachment thing. I do wonder if some of this also comes from the fact that Revenge of the Sith, for better and for worse. I mean, I thought it was a good move on his part, but maybe it had some repercussions that we are just seeing now. Revenge of the Sith, the way that film is edited and the way the story is told, Anakin's fall really does seem to just hinge on the fact that, oh my god, my wife, who I have this like unhealthy attachment to, is dying. I'm going to turn the dark side and turn against all my friends and kill the younglings and just, all right, Empire. And then, fascism's cool, man. And not kind of be a little bit more nuanced, like, oh yeah, this is one catalyst, but Anakin in Attack of the Clones, he does have these fascist authoritarian tendencies. He does have this kind of ego to him. He is kind of like, I'm the chosen one. Why am I not a master? I'm the chosen one. I did all this stuff. You shouldn't make me a master. It's unfair.
What the flip?
Right. I mean, let's
young Skywalker. I'm not sure getting any respect. So do you think in some ways, because and that's kind of maybe I don't want to say George's fault, but like George had more ideas in his mind for why Anakin fell outside of my wife's gonna die, and I really love my wife, so I gotta turn against everyone. Like I love I can get that to a certain extent, but I feel like there's gotta be more steps than just, oh my god, my wife's dying, now a good person's gonna become the second in command to Space Hitler. So go ahead.
Funny enough, I think, again, I don't want to be pulling this out of my butt and just saying this, but I believe there were reshoots in Revenge of the Sith.
There were
that were specifically used to kind of beef up the whole reason as to why Anakin fell to the dark side, and I believe they were all Padme centric. Were they not? It was adding this element of like, okay, Padme's gonna die, I'm gonna use that more. So the fact that had to be added in reshoots tells me that it wasn't the primary reason George Lucas wanted people to think like, oh, this is why Anakin fell to the dark side, but that aside, let's look at that moment where he is scared and fearful of losing his wife, because Luke says something very interesting in The Rise of Skywalker, that confronting fear is the destiny of the Jedi. And if you look at every single Skywalker, I'm not going to say they all fall, because they don't all fall, but they all have a lapse of judgment, of morality, of something, because of this fear connected to either a vision or just this overwhelming like idea of something that they can lose. Of course, Anakin, we already went over. Luke, in Empire Strikes Back, he goes back to save his friends because he's really scared of losing them.
Luke also with Ben.
Leia, although it's only mentioned, we know Leia had a fear of losing her son, so she gave him off to Luke, which ended up losing her son. And I know that's a tough one to talk about, because this is Leia we're talking about, and there's plenty of feelings regarding that. But Leia did have a Force vision, and whenever we see Force visions, it's always something negative that affects the character, and they always kind of end up making it come true in some way, of like, because they give into that fear. And that's what's important. That's why I think confronting fear is the destiny of Jedi is a great quote. And also, like, tie this back into the prequels. What is the first conversation that Qui-Gon tells Obi-Wan in the Phantom Menace Trade Federation, when they're getting into when they meet up in like the first scene? He's saying like, don't center on your anxieties, Obi-Wan. And Obi-Wan's like, oh well, Master Yoda says it's good to, what was the line?
Be mindful of the future.
Be mindful of the future, but not at the expense of the moment. And I think that is such a connection there, because again, are you the type of person that is going to be constantly in fear of the future and what could end up happening?
Right.
Or are you the kind of person that can only focus on the moment and like realizes here and now you need your attention? And I think that's the ultimate takeaway from like the Skywalker saga in general. And what all of these, it connects to Rey, it connects to Anakin, it connects to Luke. It all connects together. So that one conversation is almost a perfect setup for the fact that the destiny of a Jedi is to confront fear. So
agreed. I have 2 more points I want to make, which we actually didn't get into.
Yeah.
Because you got Omar, you got a lot of my stuff, like got Anakin, Kylo, and all that stuff. But I have 2 more points. I think they really connect to each other. So, Force Awakens, I think it probably does have the least prequelisms in it, but there is one at the beginning of the actual movie where Lord Santekka says, "Without the Jedi, there can be no balance."
Right.
And this is a big one because, fun fact, the whole balance of the Force thing that comes with the prequel. That didn't come with the original trilogy.
That's true.
You know, and there's a whole conversation there. But I do think that this leads into, it's not the prequel trilogy, but it is Prequelist. So it's the Yoda arc from the season 6 of Clone Wars, where there's a lot of people out there, some of our friends, who are like convinced that this final victory that Yoda talked about against the Sith, against the dark side, hasn't happened yet. Like, this is going to be like some big apocalyptic Middle-earthian hoo-ha battle. I argue that this final victory has happened, and that is essentially that Jedi have learned to become Force Ghost. So that means now, especially the way Force Ghosts seem to work, that any Jedi from any time period, from here to the future, there's a Force user, a Force Ghost can come, help him out, and the ways of the Jedi live on forever. While Palpatine had to, get his exegol science and his back thing and his
dark arts, cloning,
and his science, and the Sith are gone because of him. I mean, they can always find an excuse to come back, but for the most part, the Sith are gone. He's dead. He did his immortality. He's been wiped from the face of the earth. Palpatine's legacy is of the dust. So that's what I believe that the Yoda arc is very much symbolized in the Rise of Skywalker, with that defeat of the Jedi are immortal, but the Sith have been wiped from the dust.
That's a great, like, I love that parallel so much in regards to, like, the Sith, in order to achieve immortality, they have to, like, take over the body of the next person and then, like, create this weird cycle of just having to, like, use dark science and cloning in order to like even think about continuing their own physical appearance the way they were. Whereas the Jedi answer is like so much more in tune with nature and the living force. Like I love that there, and I've always thought that like because I think it is like every Jedi becomes one with the Force, obviously, but only a select few that have trained themselves can like come from like the Force and then kind of manifest themselves back with the. But yeah, no. That aside, I love that parallel, and I've always loved the fact that just a special like a tidbit about the Darth Plagueis novel is that I think the original pitch for it was going to be a parallel story about Darth Plagueis and then Qui-Gon attempting to find like the way for immortality, and that just kind of feeds into that. I love that. Now I only think of Qui-Gon and Darth Plagueis as like these parallel figures on two opposite spectrums of like how to achieve immortality, and maybe more accurately would be like Palpatine and Qui-Gon, but I still would have loved that version of that novel and kind of see how what kind of insight we could have gotten from that. So,
I mean that's totally where we landed when we talked about Darth Plagueis a few weeks ago.
Nice.
Yeah, I mean they're both Anakin's grandparents, if you will.
In a way, yes. Yeah.
I'll just say, Joel, you talked about how the great victory for all time, the ultimate victory, has already been achieved. That's a very Christian idea. That because the idea that time isn't necessarily this fully linear thing, that the ultimate victory of the light side, it's already there, it's already true, it's already real, because there actually isn't a dark side to actually oppose it. It's just attempts to control the light. It's attempts to move away. The way it, the Christian tradition explains it, there's light, and then it's not like this active darkness. It's light and shadow, as in light and unlight. And so there's that. But then because of that, the importance of experiencing the oneness of the Force, being one with the Force for all time, we call that eternal life in a Western context. That can be experienced now. We can submit to the will of the Force and commune with the Force and be one with the Force. Now, it is fascinating the importance of Force ghosts in the sequel trilogy, both in the Last Jedi and in the Rise of Skywalker,
Right.
On Octo specifically. You know, again, we mentioned Yoda's influence on Luke on Octo, and then of course Luke, and you mentioned Omar did a great job, the legacy of the Jedi, Luke's influence on Rey. That it really brings it home. That I mean, and coming to think of it, my letdown with the Rise of Skywalker was, did it really justify the existence of a sequel trilogy? Did it really wrap things up? Was there a need to go beyond Return of the Jedi? I really loved the way The Last Jedi looked back and reflected and commented on the Lucas saga, if I can use that.
Right.
I mean, it's harder to see for me with Rise of Skywalker, but Omar, I appreciate that you brought all these things out in that way.
Those are
the way the Rise of Skywalker also provides some commentary on that.
Yeah, just to close things off on my end here, it's just it's
I do
the
have one more point I wanted to make though, and then you can close it.
Oh yeah. Well, why don't you go ahead? Yeah.
Okay, so one more point, because I think this is also bad. Finally, like this is made a small point, but everyone brings it up, and I want to bring it up too. Anakin Phantom says the biggest problem in the galaxy is no one helped each other, and then here comes the people fleet. It's not a faction, it's not an army, it's just everyone and their mother and father and sister and brother and everyone else just comes to Exegol, and they're like, "Oh no, we're not dealing with this Palpatine stuff again. Well, we're done with it." So it's like everyone just shows up for the final battle. Oh, there we go. Thank you.
Because you got to see it, right? Look at that.
Look at all those people. Look at all those people. But yeah, no, Omar, feel free to put your closing point, because that was really much the last point of this.
Yeah, no, I mean, everything said about like The Last Jedi, that kind of encapsulates kind of thematically what I feel like is a good representation for the prequels. But for The Rise of Skywalker, for me, like, I think it really justified the idea of the sequels, just in that it gives closure to an idea that was in Revenge of the Sith that never got paid off, being the opera scene, the idea of Darth Plagueis, and the ability to maintain life after death. It also, and of course, again, with Kylo Ren and the parallel between him and Anakin, and how it really does kind of, in my opinion, close off like threads that were added with the loss of his mother and the loss of his wife. Again, and those are two things that maybe didn't necessarily need to be like bookended, but they were added after the fact. They were added after we had the original trilogy. People who were there and in the theaters of Return of the Jedi, they didn't think very much about Darth Vader's mother and wife, but now years later, it's something that was added, and now it kind of feels like that can properly have a bookend in that regards. So those there are kind of like, for me, the strongest connections to the prequels that exist, and that exists within the sequel trilogy, along with, of course, the Last Jedi. But I love it. I really love this topic, and it's my favorite thing to rewatch these films, in my opinion, through release order, to be able to see kind of how this story starts and ends with the Skywalker saga, which is my favorite aspect of Star Wars. So I'm always, and I'm not going to lie, The Rise of Skywalker isn't my favorite of the sequel trilogy films, but at the same time, I have made peace with it through kind of thinking about the narrative and working things out on my own. And in a way, like, I think that's healthy. That's a healthy way to go about thinking about narratives and media that maybe you don't necessarily click with immediately. Just kind of Make it make sense. It's a popular saying on Twitter. Make it make sense. Well, you can. You absolutely can make it make sense.
That's what Star Wars does with books every day. So
That's
it
true.
makes it make sense.
Make it make sense. Make it make sense.
Yeah.
You can.
And, there were a few other little things that, like I didn't get to mention, like Rey and Kylo's final duels is on water compared to Anakin Obi-Wan's, which is on lava.
Great parallels there. Yeah. Absolutely. Great aesthetic parallels there. So yeah.
But yeah, Matthew, do you have any wrap up this topic? I think we're pretty much good.
Again, I mean, I makes you want to watch Rise of Skywalker again. Which is a feat, because it's not that I disliked it. It's just I had it's hard. Maybe I get distracted by the Dark Arts cloning bit.
Yeah.
Whereas Last Jedi forces you to sticks it right in your face. So I love it when it gets stuck right in my face. But yeah,
right.
Omar, thanks for helping me see that there. I don't know. Otherwise, I think I'm all right.
Yeah, I think we are good. I mean, I would suggest read the novel. I love the novel. But yeah, that's it, folks. That was our sequels to the prequels in the
there we go.
bit. And that was such a fun conversation to have. Thank you, Omar, for joining us. That was great listening to you. It's like I feel like you got all your thoughts out, and I loved it. Loved it.
Yeah, no, I rambled a lot, so sorry about that. But if any of it made sense to you, I'm happy about that.
One more thing.
Yeah, go for it.
One more thing. I just wanted to say this is just a good little thing from Tyler. Jedi know they are part of everything, and the Sith know they are part of nothing. Meaning the Jedi seek nothing, and the Sith seek everything. Yes, indeed.
The selfish and the selfless. George Lucas mentions that a few times, I think. So.
Yep. And so does Rian Johnson and J.J. Abrams. So there we go.
Yeah.
All right, that's a great, as mentioned, that's a great point to wrap things up. Thank you, everyone, in the comments on all the different places we show this video, show this podcast, and as well as on audio. Let us know what you thought of the sequels and the prequels and everything else we talked about, Filoni and Lucas, etc., attachment, etc. Comment below on YouTube, comments on Twitter, Instagram. You can give us a follow at Ion Cannon Pod. There on Twitter and Instagram. Also, of course, on the Star Wars Underworld Twitter or Star Wars Underworld YouTube page, Star Wars Underworld Facebook page, rather. Do give this video a like and a share. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Omar, I'll start with the plug with you. Where can they find you? Well, first of all, thanks again so much for coming on. And where can they find you on the internet?
Yeah, absolutely a pleasure. So currently I'm video editing for Culture Slate Reacts. So just look up Culture Slate Reacts and you'll find some of my work there. But I'm also creating Star Wars content at the moment, just shorts. And at the moment as well, I'm kind of taking my time on some longer form content. But you can find my socials on TikTok, Twitter at The Negotiator 95. It's right there. But on YouTube, you could just look up at The Negotiator, and that's me. So yeah.
Speaking of Revenge of the Sith, there we go. The Negotiator.
The Negotiator. Yep.
Joel, where can they find you?
You can find me at JID 2021, again, JID 2021, or you can follow me at the Ion Cannon Pod, where I will always post retweets and tweet threads and all that good stuff. You can also just find me on the SW Discord as well. Again, this Friday at 6 p.m., we will be at Pacific time, 9 p.m. Eastern. We will be hosting a game night. We will be playing Fortnite. So join us. If you don't want to play, just hang out with us.
I'll try to be there.
Yeah,
I will try.
Do not. Yeah, I'll try to be there too.
Nemec says try.
Yeah,
try.
There you go.
That's true.
Yeah.
Right on. And you can follow me on Twitter at NEUGene45, Instagram at MNEUG1138. I don't know what between soccer and Star Wars and Star Trek and all that fun stuff. And of course, also at Ion Cannon Pod. And then Tractor Beam, got a shout out to that again. Matthew here with the Tractor Beam comics reviews. I got that so easily. Rolls off the tongue, right? Rolls off the tongue. On Spotify and Apple Podcasts, as well as every single Ion Cannon episode, audio only if you're driving or to going for a walk or whatever, what have you. Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Just search Ion Cannon Pod. You'll see this logo here in a blue background. That's what we look like. Check those out. And Monday nights for the main show. Fridays ish for the Tractor Beam. Next week we are still talking about the clones, as I mentioned, Bad Batch, but also just Clone Wars and everything that we cook up here, thinking about the clone army, the Grand Army of the Republic, the Jango Fett clones, Tamara Morrison, T. Bradley Baker, etc., diving into all that fun stuff. Of course, also I forget who plays Omega, and
Michelle Ang.
Michelle Ang, and oh goodness, who plays Boba Fett? What's his name? The kid's
Tamara
name?
Morrison.
No, the kid.
Oh, Daniel Logan.
Daniel Logan.
Daniel Logan. Yeah. I mean, I don't know if we're going to dive into the actors behind it, but we're going to talk the idea of the clones and what they represent in different storylines. See what we cook up. But until then, Joel, Omar, let's blow this thing and head home.